I recognise most faces in the room, but for those who don't know me, my name's Carl Jones. I'm the editor of Shropshire Business Magazine, part of the team at BBC Radio Shropshire. And for the purposes of this morning, I am your host for the event today for our Business Energy Breakfast. And everybody needs a bit of energy on a Monday morning, don't they? And bacon butty for me is a good place to start, to be honest. Just want to spend a couple of minutes before we start just explaining a bit about why we're here, what's going to happen over the next hour or so. This event has been pulled together by the team from Shropshire Council and lots of other partners as well to basically try and deliver some free advice on how to improve energy resilience and reduce your energy costs. Not really looking at so much at things you can do in the future. It's more targeted at things that you can actually do now, things you can benefit from now, things that are going on now. So Shropshire Council, March's Local Enterprise Partnership, March's Growth Hub, all involved in this today. You're going to hear two presentations this morning from very different perspectives, and then we've got two panels to present to you as well, hence the chairs over here, where we'll be looking at a wide range of things really: sustainable energy solutions, funding sources, environmental auditing, how to meet net zero in the most cost-effective way, examples of best practice. We've got some companies here in the room this morning which are already doing things that you might want to hear about and benefit from, and lots more as well. Though the idea is at the end of each panel debate there'll be a question and answer session as well, so we want to keep this nice and informal, nice and chatty, so do feel free to ask any questions at the end of each panel debate. Today, as you'll probably notice, hence the lights and the cameras, is being filmed. So if you're sat next to somebody or you've come with somebody this morning that you're not supposed to be with, you might want to move to the back. Otherwise, it's being filmed for Shropshire Council's purposes. It's also, parts of this will be used as highlights on Shropshire Business Live TV's show later on this month. So that's why the cameras are here. Without further ado, though, we have a nice slide clicker here ready for our first guest speaker. So I'd like to hand over to our representative from the Big Solar Co-op. Let's give a welcome to Kevin Oobridge.
Thank you, Carl. Right, that's the professional bit over and done with. My name's Kevin Oobridge. Oh, I can look here, sorry. Yeah. Community Solar Anywhere. So what's Community Solar got to do with business? Well, the Big Solar Co-op was set up a few years ago by Share Energy, which has been in community solar, wind and hydro, community energy for the last 12 years, and has set up a number of projects across the UK, helped community solar groups set up, community wind groups, community energy groups set up, and it helps them manage those projects. And in fact, they've recently helped set up Shropshire and Telford Community Energy, which is now trying to buy out the Twemlow's solar farm and take that into community ownership rather than private ownership. So there's a lot of experience in community energy. And community energy was very popular and very successful because, or not just because of, but partly because of the feed-in tariff, which has now been removed. So there is no feed-in tariff, so there is no kind of, not as much money coming from community energy projects as there was. So Share Energy decided to set up the Big Solar Co-op to try and kind of fill that gap and get as much solar on as many rooftops as possible. And so they set up the Big Solar Co-op, which is a not-for-profit cooperative working across the UK. We build and own rooftop solar. Host sites benefit from low-cost electricity, and we're carbon first, ethical and professional. You'd have to take my word for it that we're ethical and professional. We are carbon first. We're not about making money. We are about getting solar on rooftops and reducing carbon emissions. And just to prove the point that it's needed, this is a typical city in the UK. It's actually Birmingham, I think, or a part of Birmingham. And as you can see, there's lots of sort of centres there where they could use solar, and they use a lot of energy recycling centre, electric go-karts, metal finisher. I don't really know what a metal finisher is, but there are lots of buildings there with big rooftops that could use a lot of electricity. So there's a lot of potential for solar in the UK. In fact, if we just used 5% of the available UK commercial rooftop, we could save £12.6 billion a year in energy costs. So that's just 5%. If a third of the UK warehouses, so just warehouses, use solar, it would generate something like 50 gigawatt, capacity to deliver the entire requirement for, so 50 gigawatts of electricity. So there's an awful lot of potential there. So you'd think there would be a lot of solar on rooftops all the time. So why isn't there? Well, the return on investment for businesses, typically, you know, businesses might plan ahead 3 to 5 years ahead, but the return on investment for solar panels is a lot longer than 3 to 5 years. Was a lot longer. It's not that much longer now because energy prices have gone up so much. But we provide the capital. So as the big solar co-op, we buy the solar panels, we put them on rooftops free of charge, do all the sort of grid connection and everything, and then we sell the electricity back to the rooftop owner or user. So the return on investment argument doesn't stack up anymore. So hopefully we can get solar on rooftops. Business futures may be uncertain, and that's another thing. If you're buying something that's an investment for 20 or 30 years, solar panels can last beyond 30 years, but your payback time might be, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. You might be thinking, well, our business isn't going to be here in 10 or 15 years. We're going to be down the road, or we're going to be very different to what we are now. So we take and spread the risk. So it doesn't matter whether you're there or not. If we buy the panels, we put them on the roof. If you move, then we'll use them for the next occupier of the building, or we'll move the panels. We own the panels. We can move them wherever we like. So we take and spread the risk, which again takes a big disincentive away from the whole deal. Lack of expertise, and I guess if you've ever investigated putting solar on your roof, you quickly realise that you don't understand it. It's very simple solar. You know, the sun falls on the solar panel, creates an electric current, and you use the electricity. But actually making that happen is very much more complicated. We've got years of experience. The big solar co-op's only been going for 3 years, but the people working there have got years of experience, and we've been set up by Share Energy, which has years of experience of these types of projects. Who to trust? Well, I've said already we're an ethical and trustworthy business, and again, you'll have to take my word for that. But we are not for profit. We are carbon first. It's not about making money. It is about getting solar on rooftops and giving the rooftop owner or user the best possible deal we can, and still manage to afford to put the panels up there and make it work financially. And it's just very complicated. I've already said it's complicated. We're volunteer-led. Our volunteers are very well trained. Our professionals who manage installation, grid permits, insurance, all that sort of stuff, we've got a lot of experience and we're very well trained. So it is complicated, but we do everything for you. So if you've got a big rooftop and high electricity usage, we'll do everything for you. All you've got to do is, I don't know, pay for a solicitor to just check the contract agreement and sit back and get lower cost electricity. Sites which are viable now, you need a big rooftop, and it's not a very big rooftop. This roof, if this was a rooftop, this room, it would easily be big enough, I would think. It just needs to be 250 square metres, and about 20,000 spend a year on electricity. We used to say 12,000, but it's about 20,000. It depends, because some people are on sort of older contracts and their electricity price hasn't gone up yet, and you know, so it's very difficult to know. If in doubt, just put your building forward to us, and we'll check it out for you. Ideally, we'd like the building to be there in 30 years' time, because if we put solar panels on it, they will last at least 30 years, and they'll be providing lower cost electricity for at least 30 years. If the building's not going to be there in 30 years' time, there's a disincentive for us to put the panels up. But as I say, we can move them, and you know, so again, if in doubt, come and ask me, and we'll check it out for you. And as you can see, we can put solar panels. We'll put solar panels on any building, whether it's community, hospitals, schools, factories, offices, supermarkets, whatever. I suppose there are some buildings we won't put on, you know, with ethical considerations, although I can't really think of any offhand at the moment. But any big building with high electricity usage. So if you've got a big building and you've got high electricity usage, what do you get for, well, I was going to say for your money, but it doesn't cost you anything. So you get solar at zero capital cost, which I think is a big incentive to go with us. You get electricity bill and carbon savings from year one. So as soon as the panels are up and working, you'll be saving money on your electricity, and you'll be saving carbon emissions. And depending on how big the roof, that'll dictate how much you save of both of those. You get increased energy independence, which kind of energy independence wasn't necessarily a thing a few months ago or a few years ago, but now it really is important. You know, who knows what the energy price is going to do? Hopefully it will tumble to crazily low prices, but I don't think it is going to do that. The chances are it's going to go up, and certainly after April, with when they take the cap away, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Plus, of course, you're all on different contracts, so you may be waiting with bated breath for the end of your contract and wondering what sort of contract you can negotiate with your provider, if your provider's still there, because a lot of the electricity companies have disappeared because of the rise in prices. You get a hedge against future rises. There's this wonderful graph which doesn't really tell you much, but the yellow bars are the cost of solar energy, of our solar energy, and that would increase with inflation. Obviously, inflation is through the roof at the moment, so that's not a very attractive prospect, but it will settle down. Trust me, it will settle down to about, I don't know, between 2 or 3%. I mean, it was much, much lower than 2 or 3% for a number of years, but on average, over a 20-year period, it will be between 2 or 3%. Energy prices over the last 20 years typically have risen by 6.5%, say. So we'll offer you a reduced energy price in year one, and then in year two, it will be even more reduced because the prices will diverge and diverge and diverge. So by year 30, you know, who knows what it will be, but that's the general idea, that you save money and you continue to save more and more money as you go on. There's a 5-year buyout option. So we'll come in, we'll put the solar panels on your roof free of charge. We'll charge you for the electricity at below the market rate, and we used to say 10 to 20% below the market rate. The most recent proposals I put out have been 50% below the market rate, and possibly more. Again, it depends what contract you've negotiated with your provider. So you don't get any of the hassle of putting the solar panels up, understanding it, the grid connection, insurance, all that sort of stuff. And then after 5 years, you can buy the panels off us at the depreciated cost, which is a really good deal. Again, we're not in it to make money, so we make it as fair as possible and offer you the fairest price we possibly can. And you might not want to buy out after 5 years. If you do buy out, obviously you get all the electricity from the solar panels totally free of charge, and you can buy out after 6, 7, 10, 15 years or whatever, or you can just go through to the full 30 years. I've talked about us trying to do as fair a deal as possible for the the rooftop owner or the electricity users, and you can get all sorts of legal agreements with, you know, small print and horrible stuff like that. We make the legal agreements as fair as possible to the client company as possible. For example, there are no penalties for repairing the rooftops. So if your rooftop is damaged and we have to remove the panels, you have to fix the rooftop, we have to put the panels back up. We'll do that at our cost, not at your cost. And we won't charge you for the electricity that you're not buying from us when the panels aren't up there. So that's one of the ways we try and make it as fair as possible. I don't know what other agreements would do, but typically they might say, well, we'll have to charge you for the electricity you're not using, that's not being generated, you know, and we'll maybe have to charge you for taking the panels off the roof and putting them back up. We don't charge you for any of that. That's all built into the financial model. So we basically put the panels up free of charge, and you get the cheaper electricity, and you don't have to worry about anything. There are no minimum energy use clauses, so, you know, if you have a couple of bad months or, you know, something happens, we don't say, oh, well, you've still got to pay for electricity you're not using. So that's, again, a demonstration of the fair legal agreement. And you'll be a beacon for future sites. So if you've got lovely solar panels on your rooftop, you can be getting cheaper electricity, but also you can show off about it and say, look, we're really into helping with the climate change battle, and we're being as green as possible. And have I mentioned we're trustworthy? Again, you've just got to take my word for that. We'll build the relationship, and you'll get to trust us. But we're not for profit. We are about putting solar on rooftops and reducing carbon and energy bills. We've had a share offer very recently, and we've raised our minimum raise, which was 600k. I think since then we've had another 200 pledged, so we're opening the share offer again at the end of March, and it will be kind of opening on a rolling basis, so every quarter or something. We've got 3 projects planned. McConnell in Ludlow, which is 120 kilowatt peak. Kerry Ingredients in Tenbury Wells, which is a much bigger array, 300 kilowatt peak. And then Edencourt, which is quite a tiny array, and possibly we wouldn't normally go with a rooftop and electricity usage that size or that amount, but it's early days, it's in Birmingham, and it's a medical practice, so there are lots of good reasons why we want to put solar on that rooftop. So those are our first few projects, and that's it. That's the big solar co-op deal. Am I allowed to ask if there are any questions, or?
To do whatever you want.
Are there any questions? Deb?
Hi, thanks, Kev. Deb Kenzie for Environment. We support a lot of small and micro businesses and their sustainability. And a lot of those are in warehouses where they don't own the roof.
Yeah.
You know, there's Bill next door and Joe next door and then Catherine next door to that. So they haven't got the whole of the tennis court roof. It's
Yeah.
somebody else. And one of the things you said was rooftop owner or user.
Yes.
How is there a way of Big Solar Co-op helping Joe and Catherine and whatever when they don't own their roof?
Yes, if you don't own your roof, there are sort of various scenarios of that. You might use the whole roof, as in you use the whole building, but not own it, or you might use a part of the roof and not own it. There are ways around that. Basically, we have to come up with an agreement with the rooftop owner to lease the roof off them, put the panels on, and then sell the electricity to the rooftop user. If there are multiple users of the roof or of the building, that might be a deal breaker. It makes it much more complicated. If there are, well, it might be a deal breaker. I can't go into the details.
But in the
Yeah, it is possible. It's much more, and if you use the whole building but you don't own it, then that's very possible. It's just very complicated. But whereas with a commercial setup, they'll see how complicated it is and think, well, we'll go somewhere else because you know there's lower hanging fruit. We'll stick it out and we'll work with you to negotiate how it, you know, how we can get solar on the roof and get you cheaper electricity. So that isn't a deal breaker. It becomes much more complicated if there are multiple users, but again, we can talk about it. You know, we're not going to walk away at the first gasp.
It's useful to know, Councillor.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Bernie Bentic. I'm with Shrewsbury Town and Shropshire Council. If your organisation has raised capital by share offers, but it's a non-profit-making organisation, what's the incentive for investors to invest in the company?
We offer a 4% return. It's not. We don't make a profit, we make a surplus which we reinvest in solar we put on roofs. We offer a 4% return on the shares that people buy, annual return, up to a 4% return on those shares. But we don't make a profit as such, we just plough everything back into either the shareholders or the solar panels. Yeah.
Is there any adjustment for inflation?
Not as far as I know. They are thinking of increasing the return on future share offers, but I don't. It's just an ongoing 4% return unless you bought it at say 5 or 6% or whatever. But I that's as much as I know really about the share offer. Any?
Yeah, hi Kevin. I'm Mark Thompson. Installation teams to install this. I mean, obviously the market's booming at the moment, supply chain issues, and even to get them to come round and give a quote. How are you meeting that challenge?
We've got an installer. They're based in Basingstoke, so it's one company at the moment. They're going to do our initial installations. We do need to rectify that. We'll either recruit and train up our own installers, and we have got a number of people connected with the Big Solar Co-op and Share Energy, you know, that have experience of installing. But we've got an installer who will do the first installs, and we possibly before we've trained up people we recruit, we'll have to outsource to other people locally. We haven't kind of worked out the finer detail of that yet, but we've got an installer for the first installs. But it is a problem. It is a big problem. Yeah.
Sorry, me again. You mentioned a lot of different possibilities for installation in commercial and other rooftops. What uptake have you had, or what interest have you had from large players in the Shropshire environment, such as the Health Service, Shropshire Council itself, and other large users that might enable you to increase the scale of your operation?
In Shropshire, we haven't had any contact with the big hospitals yet. We might have spoken to them, but we haven't done any arrays. I should say that Shropshire Council part-fund my part-time role with the Big Solar Co-op, and we're working very closely with Shropshire Council to identify businesses that can take our solar, and also council buildings. So we're in discussions with Shropshire Council about what buildings we're going to use. We've got a couple of town councils that are interested. We've got some big businesses as well that are interested in solar. I can't really say the names of them because that's confidential at the moment. But from our 3 examples where we're going to install at the end of March, we've got McConnell in Ludlow, Kerry in Kerry Foods, so that's a well-known brand, and there are a number of other big businesses, but I can't tell you the names of them at the moment, sorry. But I think we've got something like 300 sites lined up nationally, and if they all come to fruition, then that will keep us busy for a very long time. But we'll have to see how they go.
Great, excellent.
Brilliant.
Kevin,
Thank
thank
you.
you for that. Don't you escape. You're taking a seat
Oh,
on our
right.
panel right now. I had to bring the question session to an end, otherwise you'd have used up all the questions that I've got written down here for our panel. So yeah, this is great. I think the best thing to do now is let's just keep this debate going and keep these questions coming. As you've probably noticed, if you do have a question, I either need to repeat it here at my microphone or we need to get a mic to you so that everybody who's watching it on catch-up or binge watching the box set later can understand what the questions are that are being asked. So we know Kevin, we've heard from Mark. Can we invite Mark Thompson from ASON to the panel, along with Tim Yare as well from Midlands Net Zero Hub. Give him a round of applause. I think we're all right for microphones as well. Kevin's got his very own posh one, and you can have a couple of handhelds here. So maybe to start with, gents, if I just ask the two of you just to explain a little bit about your particular area of expertise, what you do, who you are.
Okay, my name's Mark Thompson, Managing Director of ASON Group, based in Telford. We are a battery company, and we have been for quite a few years, but we got into energy storage around about 2012 when they invented a little solar generator for Africa. So that was inverter, battery, solar. So that's really what took us on this journey on actually, that thing pops up, as Kevin's alluded, 5% on rooftops. We could power the whole country, and it's taken a war and all this other stuff to actually get people switched on, which we have been badgering for some time. But I think energy storage is that little bit that where solar and battery and wind, that you don't know when it's going to blow and you don't know when it's going to be sunny, but when it does, you want to capture everything. And if you look at some of the places, they're not open at weekends, so all that energy, where's that going? So again, battery storage is really what we're up to.
And Tim?
All right. Is this on?
It certainly
It
is.
doesn't sound on. Right. My name's Tim Yare. I work for the Midlands Net Zero Hub, but my role here is to support the Marches LEP in delivering the energy strategy. Strategy was written a few years ago now, back in 2018, and it's all about trying to overcome what the main issues are in terms of energy in the Marches region. That's primarily about capacity. But it's also about renewable energy, and it's also about things like fuel poverty. Because energy is a big part of all of our lives, and it's important that we take everything along in the whole journey. We don't just concentrate on one particular element. So yeah, my role is to support the local authorities, the businesses, the LEP, whoever else in delivering energy projects.
And Mark, I know you asked a question of Kevin there around the installation, the practical side of it. How big a part is the skills issue at the moment and having the infrastructure to keep up with what we need to do?
Absolutely. I think that's why one of the questions, I think, as Shropshire Council, Telford Council and the Marches as a general, we know that we've got a skill shortage for this net zero. As I say, it has been speeded up with Ukraine. And now I think, you're lucky to get somebody to come round and quote you in 4 months, let alone put an installation just to come round to your building. Oh, we'll come and see you in 4 months' time. I think it's 9 months on some residential projects. So you can imagine the existing companies that are out there, they're obviously overworked. But also that increases prices. Why would you take a job at 2,000 when you can get paid for 4,000? So, we need those skills and jobs and colleges to actually upskill. So if you've seen a lot of plumbing now turning on to getting involved with energy storage and solar, because, hopefully, we get rid of those gas boilers in time. But yeah, I think there's a lot of upskilling that's got to be done, but also I think, we're having to really lead the colleges that your next generation of kids coming through and youngsters will be around the green skills agenda, because that's what we need.
Well, I mean, I know you've got a big project particularly going on in Telford at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. I think, you know, we knocked on Telford College 3 years ago. We said, look, you need to put energy storage in. Well, why do I want to put energy storage? What are we going to get out of this? I said, well, this is coming down the road, guys. We don't have enough people trained putting in energy storage into homes and commercial properties. You're dealing with live fuel here. This is not, no respect, solar is pretty standard on the roof. You need to be very competent and very clever, but when you're dealing with electricity and wires and cable and inverters, putting it all together, I see it as a BT engineer's job. You know, that kind of role. It's not just a twin and earth, put a couple of sockets in. You're dealing with live, high voltage, low voltage battery systems that actually needs a bit of care. And to do that, you then need to bring the skills in. So I actually did help them write the standard for MCS, because being a battery geek, I could see lots of bad installs going along, and I thought this is not right for the industry, and I didn't want to see a Grenfell start to evolve by just getting what I call cowboys into the market and absolutely ruin it before you've even started it.
So if you're a battery geek, then Tim, are you a net zero geek? What do we call you?
He is.
I'm just wondering. Obviously, a lot of plans, strategies for local authorities, for lots of other organisations, would have been written 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. How relevant are they now to what's going on?
Good question. I think they are still relevant. A lot of the questions that are posed in the 2018 Marches Energy Strategy are still right. What they need to do is go further. When the Marches Energy Strategy was written, there was no mention of net zero. Now you can't see a news item about energy without the words net zero being mentioned now. So there is a need to up the ambition of the energy strategy, so that's something the LEP are quite keen to see happen. So that is something we're looking to do over the next year or so, to actually make sure that we are in line with the government's net zero targets as well, and actually the more importantly perhaps in this area, the local authorities' net zero targets, which are even more ambitious than the government's. So all the 3 local authorities within the Marches have got a net zero target of 2030. That's very, very ambitious, and it's going to be quite tricky to meet that, but it's good to have that ambition, and that's what the LEP are quite keen to work with the local authorities to make sure that we get to that. We're going to have to tackle a lot of things within that, so it's not all about renewable energy generation. It's also about energy efficiency, which I know we're going to be talking about a little bit later. But it's also the other things that go on around the edges of these things. There's a lot about fuel poverty within our energy strategy, which is a key to this as well. If we don't take people along with us and make sure that they're not being adversely impacted by all the changes that are going on in the energy market, then we're not going to make it. So we need to bring everybody along with us. It's not just, as you say, Mark, about putting solar panels on roofs or even batteries everywhere. We need to bring people along with us, and there's an education piece that needs to go along with that.
And Kevin mentioned obviously some of the subsidised help that's available, and from the solar point of view, what else? I mean, what businesses I guess are going to really want to know this morning is what other help is there for me at the moment to find the capital to get me started? Yeah,
it's a very good question. It's one that the LEP have been looking to see what we can do to help support businesses. I mean, on the screen you shall see there is the Marches Energy Grant, which has been noted. That is one of the things which is taking over from previous support mechanisms. So we've had, because of European funding, some very, very good examples of what can be done within our region. So we've had the Marches Renewable Energy Grant, which has really done very, very well in putting solar PV on a lot of roofs and doing things like heat pumps. We've also had and just coming to the end now, of the Business Energy Efficiency Programme, or BEEP, and that's been really, really useful to a large number of businesses across the Marches in actually delivering improvements, and again, that's going to be talked about a little bit later in terms of all the vast array of different things that you could do rather than just thinking about energy generation. We are looking to see what we can do to support businesses going forward, and that's something that LEP is really keen to see delivered. We're working with the partner local authorities to make that happen, and we'll be hearing more about that in the near future.
And much as the cost of living situation at the moment is causing real financial heartache for a lot of people, I mean, Kevin, from your point of view, do you think actually also it's heightened the urgency among a lot of people to actually put this to the top of their agenda as well?
It certainly has, yeah. Before I answer that, I just want to say there's also Call Shropshire and Telford, which is a free online tool.
We'll be hearing all about that later on.
Right, yes. But yeah, I mean, it certainly has, you know, I go to business events like this, I have a stand and I'm talking from start to finish and taking cards and getting emails with people desperate to reduce their energy bills because, you know, they're absolutely sky high. And I think people are terrified of what they're going to be in the future when their contract runs out or when the cap finishes. They really don't know what they're going to be paying, and they want a way of kind of equalising that a bit and saying, well, if we can get solar on the roof any way we can, then yeah, why not? In a way that they never were before. I don't know whether it was because electricity was so relatively cheap, although it always seemed quite expensive to me. But there really is almost a clamour for solar power on rooftops, particularly for businesses.
One of the other tools which is coming along, which might be of interest to people, is something that we're working with the Centre for Sustainable Energy on, which is actually a solar tool to actually see your own rooftop and actually see how much solar PV you can actually put on that rooftop. It's going to be a free-to-use platform. It uses all sorts of really technical stuff about LiDAR data and lasers and things to actually calculate what the capacity of any rooftop would be. What it doesn't do is say how strong your roof is. So it's only a first step and it gives you a rough idea. But it will be an interesting tool to have a look at your own individual buildings to see what the capacity is. And that will then hopefully be able to push people in the direction of the big solar co-op to say, we've got this roof, we reckon it can hold 20 megawatts or whatever, how big your roof is, and then take it to the next step and actually call someone like Kevin or Mark to work out what you can actually do in that area.
And Mark, I know I've seen you quoted as saying you think 2023 is the year of the battery, when it's really coming into its own then.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things last week, we had a little lunchbox sandwich wagon right next door to us, and we lent to one of our little solar generators, and actually Telford Council have banned all new catering to actually have diesel generators. So they go to see Munchbox to see this 2 kilowatt portable thing that she takes home. So she charges it for £2 for the whole week, and she was spending £25 a week on petrol. And we only found out on Friday that Telford Council, that if anyone new coming in for catering, well, can't have a diesel generator. So, you know, things are changing. So the year of the battery, and, you know, we talk about batteries, and you think about British Volt up in Northumberland, you know, they were all about automotive batteries. If you read the press, it's all about energy storage batteries. So you can see where the market's going. It's needed because we do need solar. But as I say, it's weekends and various tariffs you can use with batteries. We've got one client that doesn't have solar, and he's got it for 5 petrol stations. So he's just using a daytime and a nighttime tariff. Now, obviously, we're pushing him to get solar because it'd be silly not to, free of charge once you've got your panels. But he's just using battery technology on a nighttime and a daytime tariff. And the difference is paying his capex in that version. So, you know, things are changing, and I think it is the year of the battery. We're seeing electrification. We talk about buses, keeping the lights on. You know, when we talk about solar, fantastic, it's giving electricity. We're all going EV cars. You're going to have electric buses running around. You're going to have trucks. We're going to need a lot of power to charge these vehicles that are running around the UK. So I absolutely agree with Kevin. Commercial rooftops should be, you know, absolutely, because the staff that are going to be turning up to your workplace are going to be driving electric cars, and they're all going to be wanting to be charged, and they're all buses, taxis. I could go on. Year of the battery.
Let me throw this question out then to the three of you, really. Have we got to a point now where actually adopting some of these renewable energy and storage policies is going to be crucial for actually gaining business? Do you find potential customers going to want to know what your credentials are as an employer? Are you adopting this? What's your net zero target?
Yeah.
To choose whether to work with you or not?
Well, you're seeing tenders now. tenders are going out to big companies. I mean, the big company we got here, Arco, big tenders coming out. What are you doing for your net zero policies? That if you don't hit some of these real benchmarks, you can't even win the tenders. So there really is a push from winning government tenders of reducing. I think HS2 contracts is huge. They've got to cut by 30% on their net zero. So again, diesel generators and whatever, but there's a real push just for winning your own business. But yeah, I think if you want to attract your newcomers coming through, you've got to be looking as a green company, because the kids that are now coming out of school and, they're on a mindset that we're killing this planet, and they will want to work for companies that have a real good agenda for their own business, but also for what they believe in. So I think it's a real big key message for businesses should be green anyway. But I think if you're going to entice, and it's not easy, we're talking about getting employment, we all say, where do we find them? It really is difficult out there. So it's another little tick in the box that if your company's looked as a green company and you're going down the right path, actually attracting the right people will also be important.
Yeah.
Tim, you were nodding at that one, so...
Yeah, I mean, as Mark says, it's not necessarily all plain sailing either.
No.
There are lots of barriers in the way to doing this. It would be great if everybody here went away and then immediately started installing batteries, installing PV. But you will come across other barriers as well. There will be barriers which are put up from the DNOs, the distributed network operators. So these are the people who allow people to connect new businesses or new solar PV or new batteries into their electricity system. In our area, we've got two. We've got what used to be Western Power Distribution. They're now National Grid Electricity Distribution and Scottish Power. So we've got two in our region, both of which say that their systems are heavily constrained. So we can't just put in lots of new solar PV farms and things like that without spending a huge amount of money upgrading the wires, the networks, if you like. What we're trying to do, again, with the Marches LEP is to work with those organisations to see, rather than just getting a straightforward no, which has been the typical answer we've had over the last decade or so, is to try and move that conversation on to say no, but we could do it in a different way. So we're looking to see if we can work with them to give them some more data to actually use their networks more efficiently. Because they don't really know at the moment what goes on all the time at low voltage levels. And we could make a little bit of difference working with battery storage at that low voltage level. So we are working with the DNOs to see what we can do to get better data and actually overcome some of the big constraint problems, which I know that a lot of people in the room today will have come across that no answer from WP, from NGED, and actually get to that next stage of the conversation. Because if we can get there, then we can come up with innovative solutions. There are lots of innovative solutions. Mark's at the forefront of some of those ideas, and if we can just get those conversations going, I think we could get a lot more actually done.
Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a business owner, quite a big business, last week, and they were saying that they've got the opportunity to tender for a very big NHS contract, and they got the tender criteria coming through, and it's just itemised all the things that they've got to demonstrate in terms of their green credentials. And if you look at their website, they look really good. They've got ISO, they've got sustainability policy, they've got rewilding, they've got solar panels on the roof and this, that and the other. But she was almost panic-stricken because she thought, yeah, I can see all this stuff, but I don't know how to put it in a tender in a convincing way. And so I think businesses really are focused on demonstrating their sustainability and their carbon savings to win further business. I mean, this contract would be fantastic for them, but at the moment she's thinking, well, we're not going to get it because we can't demonstrate what we need to demonstrate. What I said was, well, because I've been on a few calls with the Home Office when they've been saying about if you want a contract for, win a contract for the Home Office, just say what you're doing and demonstrate the difference you've made You don't have to be all bells and whistles. You just have to demonstrate that you've got a policy and you know where you are. You know what your emissions are. You know what you want your emissions to be. You know how much you've reduced them by. And if you don't know what they are, just say that. But just be honest. You know, hopefully she'll win this contract. But that's a new thing. Suddenly saying, oh, you've got to demonstrate all your sustainability credentials up front. That's a big ask for a lot of businesses, which is why Cool Shropshire is a good starting point, because it really gives you a grounding in what you need to do and what you need to know and where to go to learn more.
We'll pick up on that a little bit shortly on. But anybody got any questions at this point? If you have, let us know, and I'll bring the microphone over to you. I'll steal it from one of our panellists. We have got one question. Okay, hang on a minute.
Thanks, Carl. It's not so much a question as just following up on what you were saying about tenders, etc., and everybody wanting to have information. It's actually no good just saying, oh, we're a green company. And I think there's an awful lot about greenwash around. But the Competition and Markets Authority brought out a green guide code that say you have to evidence what you're doing. So you need to be able to be honest and truthful, and a number of very large companies have been taken to task over egging just how green they are. Innocent Drinks, for example. You know, now if Innocent Drinks can be taken to court and told you need to be careful about this, so it's not good enough anymore simply to say we've got ambition to be green. You need to understand what's behind it, and that's a real power, I think, to the whole agenda, is that you need to evidence action, and I'm really keen on that. So what you're saying about get to understand what your energy is, how you can do it, that's the way forward. I think it needs to be evidenced.
Excellent, thank you for that. Anybody else? There's another question. There you go, pass it across.
Can I just carry on from that argument? We've heard a lot about new battery technology. And so is this new battery technology able or required to demonstrate the embedded carbon that there is in the battery production?
Yeah, I mean, good question. You know, everyone talks about lithium and cobalt and what are we going to do with it. We're actually got a lovely story with JLR breaking that we use all their second life EV batteries and we put them into portable energy storage units. So they have a second life. So they come out of the car, they've still got another 7 or 8 years left, not to drive a car 400 miles, but actually to power a Munchbox for the next 7 or 8 years from a second life point of view. After the second life, well, what are we going to do with the batteries? Well, we need recycling plants. So the recycling plants will take 80% of that material back into new cells. So when the demand starts to increase, and this is where it's important the UK has our own gigafactories, because it's that supply chain, it's recycling plants, it's second life products, and it can all be charged by solar. Hydrogen can't. So it's a real win-win from where are we digging up our lithium? Well, it's actually, a lot of it's coming from Australia. So it's not Africa, it's not the Congo. So our supply chain is starting to develop in the UK, but our government's got to pull the finger out and start to support some of these gigafactories that we urgently need. And when we talk about, you know, putting a gigafactory in Shropshire, where would that energy come from? So it needs wind, it needs power, hence why Britishvolt is where it is, because it's by the sea, it's next to a wind farm, and there's a lovely cable from Norway that can go straight into the factory to feed it. So this is why you see gigafactories in real key areas. But coming back to your question with lithium, it is all about sustainability, second life, and recycling. 80% of that materials is going back into the battery. But with that, innovation does come. So we've just placed our first order for sodium ion cells made of salt. So battery companies won't just stop with lithium. There are other great technologies coming around. So Sodimine, invented in the UK with Theridium. They got bought out about 6 months ago, 125 million from an Indian company. But there's a place called Ampty Power up in Scotland, and we've just had our delivery of first ever Sodimine cells made in the UK, which is made of salt. So there are other technologies down the line, not just lithium, but lithium is the cost-effective product where we are today, and if people want it cheaper, that's where we are at the moment. But there are other battery technologies coming.
Thanks for that. Amazing how quickly everything's moving, isn't it? We've got time for one more question for this panel, if anybody's got anything they want to say. Otherwise, we'll say, I think we have. Okay, well, can I say a big thank you to Mark, to Kevin, to Tim. Thank you very much, folks. Time now then for our second presentation. I think Mark touched on the fact, Kevin touched on the fact that we've got the team from ACO here in Oswestry, the home safety business, Shropshire's reigning Company of the Year, to tell you more about it and what they're doing. Let's welcome Ryan Evans.
Morning everybody, how are we doing? My name is Ryan, I work for ACO obviously. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about our sustainability journey. Unfortunately, as we mentioned, I don't have the experience or the years such as Kevin does. We're coming at it from very different angles here. What I do have is kind of 3 years in a brand new building, looking at the operational maintenance of it, looking at the kind of mistakes that were made when that building was built without sustainability in mind. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we did, some of the lessons that we've learned, and then where we're going to go from there. So to begin, our very first steps. So the very first thing we did, like I say, none of us are experts at ACO, unfortunately, about sustainability. So we decided we're going to surround ourselves kind of with experts that know what they're talking about. We need to identify exactly where our emissions are coming from, look at the operational improvements that we can make to actually kind of reduce our energy usage, etc., and then really communicate and collaborate with the people that work at ACO, our colleagues, and people in the surrounding areas as well. So the very first thing, as I said, identifying where our emissions came from. So we actually engaged with a consultant, an external consultant. He looked at our carbon footprint, basically. Work out where your emissions come from. As you can see in our emissions split pie chart there, electricity is a massive part. Makes up about a third of our scope 1 and 2 emissions. So a really big part. That just really helped us to identify kind of the main action areas, as you say, the low-hanging fruit, where we could pick off the easy wins early, and then where to develop on from there. Secondly, we decided, again, we'll speak to our consultant, Alan, and to be able to hold ourselves kind of accountable to our goals, we need to make this public. So we set an ambitious target to be carbon neutral by 2030. Again, working with our consultant, that was what was kind of feasible for us. So yeah, again, just to kind of hold ourselves accountable to our goals, make sure, as I say, be transparent to the public. Everybody knows kind of what we're doing. It's a massive part of what you need to do in kind of net zero is transparency, as Deb mentioned before, with greenwashing, etc. You've got to be transparent about what you're doing. Engaging people. So Lily and I are sustainability leads at ACO. With 2% of the workforce, basically. What's going to be easiest is if we can engage everybody in ACO. You know, the first thing we decided to do was kind of work with a single person from each member of the team. So again, that takes up to maybe 10% of the workforce. Hopefully then they can go off, engage their entire team, and you're looking at a much wider range of people all working on the same thing. Makes your life a lot easier, means that Lily and I have to do less work, which is always great. After that, again, we looked into electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, again, using our external consultant. He did what we call a feasibility study. So basically, we've got a lot of people out on the road. They travel a lot of miles. Basically, we calculated exactly how many miles each of those did, looked at a kind of electric vehicle that they could use, see if their home was suitable, workarounds and things like that. So we've now actually committed to be purchasing all electric vehicles from 2025 onwards. We currently have a fleet of around 30 vehicles, and they are all hybrids, but we will be moving into that again. And the feasibility study says that we would be able to do it now. The infrastructure, again, is not quite there. It is moving along rapidly, which is always good. So hopefully by 2025, the entire UK will definitely be ready for our fleet of 30 to be out on the road. Renewable energy, we've heard plenty about solar this morning, so I won't dwell too long on this one. But yeah, we've now got a big 135 kilowatt array on the roof of our headquarters in Oswestry. Again, really big kind of investment, a massive project, but great fun to be a part of, really. And then again, a building management system. So as I say, our building's around 3 years old now, coming up on 4. It was built with a state-of-the-art kind of building management system in it. We can control all the air cons from a very central position. All the lights are on dimmer switches that depend on how much sunlight is entering the building. So yeah, a great kind of tool for us. We can set different ranges for people to use. But really, it's all about just kind of trying things out. So we started with quite a wide range of say, for example, I'll just talk about the aircon very briefly. We started with a wide range of temperatures that people could set it to. We monitored that over the course of kind of 4 to 6 months, looked at the ranges that people were actually using, slowly started to bring that in until we got people moaning that it was too hot or too cold, as people always will do, and then we could set the range from there. So really just kind of about fine-tuning what you've got. Not everything's going to be perfect. It's not going to be really simple. There's not a one-size-fits-all. You've got to make it work for you. You really need to monitor what you're kind of doing, your usage, things like that, and make the right choices for your business. And then communicate and collaborate, as I mentioned. So Lily and I have taken this role around 3 months ago. Before that, we kind of really struggled to basically communicate and engage our kind of colleagues to work with us on these kind of things. So this is just a quick example of our kind of program now, basically. It's our sustainability program. So we use what we call the 5 pillars of sustainability. So looking at sustainability in all these areas. And as you can see, environment there is pillar number 4. So yeah, a massive part of what we do, and trying to bring that kind of all into one kind of program so that everybody can understand it quite easily. So as I say, I've spoken quite briefly about what we've kind of done. I found when I did this presentation in the past, I didn't have this second bit. I didn't have the kind of lessons learned, and it didn't kind of sit very well. Nobody kind of took anything from it. ACO, we're quite a big company. It feels at times like we've got unlimited resources. So, I can talk about putting £100,000 of solar panels on the roof, and it's kind of quite easy for us. But what we have learned from that is different things that we can take away, and just simple changes that we could have made where we maybe have spent money that we didn't need to. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those now. So some people may disagree. Oh, no, not this part, sorry. So the first thing we did, as I say, was we spoke to everybody. We spoke to so many people. I think the first couple of weeks I signed up for every single event I could possibly find. I was looking at solar panels, electric vehicles, biodiversity, everything. I took it all back and I was thinking, where on earth do I even start with this? I'm looking at a carbon footprint here that tells me how much energy we're using, what our carbon emissions are. I've got all these different sources of energy, of information, and I don't even know where to begin. So what I would say is it seems like a great idea. Take on as much information as you can, but I'd probably suggest kind of pick one area to focus on first. Like I say, looking at biodiversity, or look at your energy usage, look at electric vehicles, because all that information was coming into me. As I say, I'm not an expert. I've been doing this for maybe 12 months. I had no idea where to even begin. Again, as I said, the first thing we did was our carbon footprint. Now, our carbon footprint is brilliant. Some people may disagree. It is a great tool. But I kind of think if I was in a much smaller business, would I really have needed to do a carbon footprint to begin with? I don't think so. I mean, it was a very expensive kind of tool that we took. It was very time consuming. We needed loads of information. And I mean, I don't need a carbon footprint to tell me, turn the lights off when you're finished in a room. If you're not using a computer, turn it off. Have one printer running rather than 3 at the same time. So as great a tool as it is, and I would definitely recommend doing a carbon footprint at some point. It might seem quite daunting, expensive to start with. There's really simple changes, and there's people out there everywhere that can tell you these changes without having to perform kind of this expensive tool. So I'd just say, yeah, definitely worth doing eventually. But to begin with, it's really easy. You can go back to the office now and have a look around at what you're using, and just make sure you're kind of reducing as much as you possibly can. Click it. There we go. Electric vehicles, as I say, brilliant. I absolutely love electric vehicles. I think they're great. Most people tend to disagree for some reason. Not sure why. When I first mentioned this, that we were buying electric vehicles to our specification managers out on the road, I could see every single one of their faces drop to the floor, thinking, how on earth are we going to do this? So yeah, people are very, very difficult to get on board with the electric vehicles. What we've also done is installed 10 44 kilowatt electric vehicle chargers at our headquarters in Oswestry. We thought, great, brilliant, we'll buy these, lovely, they're top of the range, perfect, exactly what we need. The guy comes over to install them. If you put all these on at the same time, you're not going to have enough energy to run your building. So we've actually had to limit all of them now to 11 kilowatt. So it's not as simple as just buying the stuff, buying electric vehicles, plug and play, as I say. It's quite a big job, it's very expensive, and it's not just as easy as plug and play. So it will get there. As I say, the infrastructure is not quite there yet. It will get there. But yeah, again, definitely speak to an expert. You can't do that yourself, unfortunately. The assumptions as well. I mean, we get invited to talk at events such as this. We do them all the time. As soon as you make that commitment to be carbon neutral, everybody thinks you're an expert. You'll have loads of people asking you questions. As I say, be transparent with people. Speak to them about exactly what you know. Like I say, I can't speak about massive energy savings. What I can speak about is the operational things that we have put in place already. Like Kevin has got a very different viewpoint from myself. So just be prepared for that. As soon as you make that commitment, people look at that and go, wow, they've made a commitment. They must know what they're doing. Unfortunately, we don't, not just yet. Engagement, as I say, people that solve all your problems, they're also mostly the root of all your problems. Very, very difficult to engage people. People have got so much on their plate, especially in this day and age, just staying afloat, doing their day job. This is another thing to add on to that. You've really, really got to drive it home. I mean, Lily and I, as I say, we just started this role, and it's kind of the main point of what we need to do is get everybody in the company engaged and all working together before we start on the massive, massive projects. If we've got buy-in from everybody, it makes our lives so much easier, as I say. Technological advancement. Again, we touched on this morning. The guys did a great job up here. There's never going to be a right time, unfortunately. I mean, there's a saying, there's only 2 right times to have done something, 10 years ago or right now. Unfortunately, we don't have the 10-year ago option. So right now, I mean, for example, our solar panels on the roof, from the time of kind of our first conversation with Go Green, the installation took about 8-9 months in total. By the time that installation was actually done, we would have been able to fit 10% more solar panels on the roof if we'd have waited. However, if we'd have waited that long, you wait another 9 months, the technology advances. There's never going to be the perfect time. You can always look at every single kind of project that you're undertaking and think, oh, well, if I leave it another 6 months, there'll be something better. There's always going to be something better, unfortunately. I mean, the return on investment for our solar panels has come right down. As Kevin mentioned, it's now about 9 years. So, I mean, we're going to be in that building hopefully for 15, 20 years. In 9 years' time, if we really wanted to, we could take it all off, put a brand new one on, it would have paid for itself. So, yeah, technology is always constantly advancing. There's going to be great things out there, but we have the tools that we need right now. They won't be as efficient as they will be in maybe 5 years' time. But, yeah, it needs to be done now. It needs to be started now, and you're always going to get a return on investment either way. The building management system, again, brilliant feature. Probably no issue with the BMS. It's probably more back again to the people. As soon as you take their aircon control away, they come with pitchforks and flames coming to your house trying to tell you to increase their range again. I mean, our office is very, very open plan. Like I say, it's not a one-size-fits-all. I can't just set it to 20 degrees and let it be done with it. You know, you get people. Somebody won't take their coat off when they're too hot, so they'll go and turn the aircon down. Another guy will be there in his shirt, absolutely freezing, whacking it back up. So, yeah, again, building management system is absolutely brilliant. But again, you've got to really engage your people and help them to kind of make all of this accessible to them. So what we try and do is put it into more common terms. For example, our solar panels on the roof will tell you how many trees is your equivalent to what your solar's generated. So make it accessible for people, not all the kind of, the difficult words basically around net zero. It can all be very confusing. So make it as accessible as you can for people so that they can really get on board with it, because otherwise you're just going to be left with a load of blank faces. ACO's kind of next steps. Keep doing what we're doing. As we say, we've committed to be net zero by 2030, so big commitment. We have a roadmap, again, that we used our consultant for, so keep following that. More targeted collaborations, again, back to kind of the information side of things. Keep going on. We're not experts, so what we need to do is just keep surrounding ourselves with experts. You know, for this electric vehicles by 2025, the purchasing from there, we can't do that ourselves. We need to speak to people. Some people that know exactly what they're doing. There's somebody out there for literally everything these days. All you need to do is have a look for it. And for example, Kevin's great initiative this morning, solar panels, you might think they're a massive investment, but there are ways around it, and there's ways around most of these things. Keep developing our learning. So again, just keep getting that information in, looking at different ways we can train ourselves up and engage the colleagues and really kind of upskill them as well in more simple ways, which helps to engage the people. And just keep an eye on technology. As I say, there's always going to be a better thing out there, unfortunately. Never a right time, but I think you just need to kind of dive in and go for it. You will get a return on investment, and it will be very, very worth it in the long run. And that is all from me. Short and sweet. Thank you very much, everybody. If there's any questions, I can take some. Lily will be on the panel just after this, so feel free to send any questions her way if you like.
I've just got one. Do you have many? Great what you're doing. Do you get many businesses coming to see you what you are doing? Do you try and encourage them, because you are a big player, and for the smaller SME or medium size, what you're doing is really good, but what you're trying to do, I think it'd be great if you could just carry some other companies on that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, our CSR program has been like a massive, massive part of what we've done for the kind of last 4 years. So that's all kind of community volunteering, things like that. So we get people in all the time to speak to us about that. We've got learning development as well. But again, not the need or the want, you know, kind of people are a bit wary to come and ask, but we try and be as accessible as we can to everybody. And if there is people out there, any of you guys or anybody that you know that wants to just come and see what we do, more than happy at any time. There will be somebody there can take you around the building, talk about exactly what we've done, who we've used. If there's any questions, I mean, our door is always open. We use the facilities that we've got is open to people in Shropshire, even for just meetings and things like that. So yeah, more than welcome. But we haven't had many. Perhaps it is something that we need to kind of push out there a little bit more and make it a bit more accessible. But yeah, I mean, our door is always open. So yeah, absolutely. Great.
And I would recommend putting 7 kilowatt chargers, because being a battery geek, you know, it's a lovely current to put in. And I've driven up with my Nissan Leaf today, 100,000 miles on it.
Yep.
You know, I've still got 126 miles from it from when I first bought it, 164. So look after your batteries.
Yep.
The more you fast charge them, you will degrade the batteries. So they won't tell you that in the small print, but actually whacking 44 kilowatts into your batteries, you are going to shorten the life of them.
Lovely.
Good tip. I'll take that one for
Excellent. And myself. Thank you very much. No problem.
Thanks to Ryan. Thank you very much. Right, microphone's back in the right place. So let's start off by welcoming the other half of the ACO partnership. Lily Ellis is going to join our next panel, along with Deborah Cairns-Stoll from Cool Shropshire and E4 Environment. We've got Simon Helmer from Pro Enviro and Neil Dady from Evora Edge. Let's say hello to them all. Excellent. One microphone between two until we need to steal one for audience questions. That's basically how we'll work. So I mean, Lily, let me start with you. So as the other half of the team, the one thing that was mentioned in Ryan's presentation there is the communicate and collaborate side of things. How has that worked? How has that played out? What did you have to actually do, and how difficult was it?
I'd say it's interesting. People are always interesting because you never know what they're going to come out with. So for us, we needed to make sure that everyone knew what we knew. So it was a formal launch of the programme, everyone in the company in the same place at the same time, which really means you need the buy-in from the top, which I'm sure everyone knows is really important. Our managing director, Neil, is very passionate and allowed us to do that. Following a formal presentation where you don't really know if everyone's listening, they could be on their phones, checking their emails, and things like that, we made sure we would put departments in front of us, asking them questions. Do you understand what we've just told you? And if you don't, that's fine. Tell us why. What don't you understand? What do you think we haven't included? Like Ryan said, we're not experts, and it's important that people feel like they can get their say in what sustainability should look like in the business that they work for. And if we haven't done our jobs, what do we need to do? And do you have any suggestions for what else we can be doing? Because there's always more. We're doing a lot at ACO because we have the resources, but it always feels like we're not doing enough. And I think it's important to keep that mindset, because we could easily sit back and say, yeah, we put solar panels up, we're all good. We've done more than that business, but you're not going to take anyone with you then. You have to make sure you're always innovating and thinking and driving it forward, and then the people should come along with you. It's challenging, but we're quite lucky that we do have an engaging workforce, and they're always happy to get stuck in and just listen, really, which is great.
Excellent. Neil, tell us a little bit more about you, Evora Edge, because you've got fingers in various pies in this field, haven't you, really? Is that fair to say?
If you say so, Carl.
I do.
Evora Edge, I think we describe ourselves now as a tech-enabled, technical asset management consultancy, whatever that means.
If that isn't fingers in lots of pies, I don't know what is.
So what we do is manage properties for real estate investment funds. real estate investment trusts, your pension funds who have got multiple buildings across the country, commercial offices, warehouses, shopping centres. And we look at those buildings from a technical asset management perspective in terms of their mechanical services, their building services, the things that consume energy. And we model buildings, dynamic simulation modelling of a building. So we'll take a building, we'll reconstruct that building in our software, and we'll look where the building is now, look where the building needs to be on a net zero carbon journey. And we've said a lot about net zero carbon this morning. What is net zero carbon? Well, actually, I don't think anybody's going to achieve net zero carbon, but what we're all going to do is go on a journey towards it. And what does that really mean? Energy use intensity, how much kilowatts per metre squared is your building absorbing? That's your target. Where are you now? And what do you need to get to? And why do you need to get to it? And actually, the reality of that situation is that I don't think there's any business that I've ever been in that wants to spend more than they earn. So it's basic economics. Make your cost as low as possible. Make your sales as high as possible. Make your margin as big as possible. It's basic economics around net zero carbon, energy saving, managing what you do day to day. And what we do is focused on energy efficiency, but actually focused on the whole performance life cycle of that building, what happens in the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And the benefit we have with investment funds is they are looking 15, 20 years on when they buy a building. They're buying the building for the long term. So they might have multiple tenants that come and go, but actually they're in that building for the long term. So how do they manage that building, transition that building towards net zero carbon? Where's the financial pinch points in that journey? They might have gas boilers that they installed 2 years ago, so there's 20 years of life left in a gas boiler. How do we manage that building in that interim period until we get to the point where we're going to change the gas boiler and put something else in? And what's the decision-making process that informs us in that journey? Because the decisions we make now, the phone call this afternoon might be a building with a gas boiler that's fallen over. The immediate action to get that building warm again is to change the boiler. Like for like, get it done, problem's gone away. But actually, what's the best thing for the building in the longer term? How do we transition that building? And that's what we do as a consultancy. It's interesting. I mean, when I started doing energy surveys 20 years ago, I was quite enthusiastic about behavioural change and talking to people and explaining to them how they could change their behaviours to save energy. I think I've transitioned into the grumpy old man phase now, so I go around looking at lights turned on and wonder why the lights are on, etc. I look in this room and I look around the corner there and wonder why those lights are on over there. And behavioural change, and we've gone through an interesting phase now because domestically we've all had to think about how we're consuming energy because our bills have gone up. But actually the reverse of that now is that people are coming back into the office environment and wanted to turn the heating up because they're sitting at home with their jumpers and things on. I want to be in a comfortable environment. Let the company look after me. So that change has come, and we're seeing the transition of people coming back into the workplace as well now, whereas before people were happy to be at home after the COVID epidemic. Now people have wanted to come back into the office environment. They wanted to come back into a comfortable environment, and we're seeing that transition and the behavioural change that we need to all build on. I used to say that I could save an office. I did work with Wrekin Housing Group. When I first went in there, I said I could save 20% on their energy cost on their head office building in Telford by behavioural change alone, and that was achieved over time. Now I would say that we could still go into a large commercial building and save 10% on energy costs just by behavioural change, just by getting people. You don't leave a tap running, don't leave the lights on. It's basic stuff.
I know that the team from ACO, is saying, look, we're not experts, we're learning as we go along. But if you're looking to project forward potentially the life cycle of a building, say 20 years, you do have to be pretty well informed experts in your field, don't you?
And we are future gazing. A lot of the time we are future gazing.
And given how fast this sector's moving, that's tough.
Massively quickly. Solar battery storage is I think the step change, almost the industrial revolution of our generation, or the younger generation, not my generation, but the younger generation. They will in what, five years time, battery storage will be taking people off grid and it would be a massive, massive change to some.
Deb, Kevin gave you the big build-up about half an hour ago, saying you've got to hear from Cool Shropshire. You've got to speak to Cool Shropshire. Tell us all about it.
Thank you, and thanks, Kev. Cool Shropshire, I'm going to look across to Adrian here, and also ACO. Cool Shropshire is targeted at your small and micro businesses who really want to do something sustainable, but haven't got the technical expertise within the company. Shropshire has got thousands of small and micro businesses. They're just as keen as ACO to do something, but haven't necessarily got the resources or the expertise. So Cool Shropshire is a software platform that is free at the point of access. I repeat that, free at the point of access. Thank you, Shropshire Council. Where businesses can go on, say a little bit about themselves, and so understand what the legal requirements that they have as a business are. It continually scares me how many businesses don't know what they should do with their waste, for example. But then the neat bit, I think, is that businesses can then go on and do some goal setting. So they say what they're doing now, they say what they want to do going forward, and this is around energy, reduce their energy consumption. It's also around waste, how they buy things, biodiversity, and the platform will actually provide you with an action plan. And rather than just, we're going to reduce energy, we've actually auto-filled some specific actions that businesses can take. So you get a start point to say, oh, right, yes, we could do that. So for each action that you say, we're going to reduce our waste, there's specific things that you can do. It's not just an ambition, it's specific actions. So that smaller businesses are set on the road. I'm just going to say now, thank you for, again, heralding around carbon footprinting. Carbon footprinting is very often a shorthand for, are you doing something? Right? So we can give advice around carbon footprinting, how to do it, but importantly also whether to do it. Is it useful for you? And also, how much energy do you put into gathering a figure which is 42? Yippee. What does that mean for anybody? So we try within the tool and the supporting resource pack to give some information to people that is actually helpful to them so that they can have an informed conversation with people who are putting tenders together. ACO, for example, I know you try and buy local, but actually what you're saying is also you want to work with ethical companies who are looking at net zero, who are trying to do something sustainable. But very probably those small local companies haven't got an environmental policy, a sustainability policy, net zero. So the Cool Shropshire platform actually enables Shropshire businesses to understand what they're doing, have an action plan, and genuinely say to ACO, yes, we could be one of your suppliers. So it's really circular within Shropshire to try and really drive the net zero agenda, and it's free at the point of access. So,
And Deb, does part of that as well, the need for that, come from something that Ryan touched on earlier, the fact that potentially there's information overload out there, and if a company knows that they need to start, it's not always obvious what the first bit needs to be.
absolutely, yeah, Carl. There are so many sources of information out there of carbon footprinting. What is it? Somebody told me that they looked into carbon footprinting and the guide that they received was 1,000 pages. Yikes. But also what we try and do with the resource pack that we've got is we will point businesses to the Shropshire guidance, to the Telford guidance if you're in Telford, to the BEAT programme, to March's LEP, so that we actually try and contain rather than give different sources. So it is a singular access point. Yeah.
Let's bring Simon in. Simon's brought his notes with him, so he must have
Brought me
lots
notes.
to say here. So just tell us a bit about you and your organisation.
I think I should have brought my sunglasses as well with these TV lights.
Pressure of Hollywood, see.
So yeah, ProEnviro, we're an energy and carbon management consultancy. We basically help organisations develop their sort of low carbon strategies, but also work with them over the longer term to help deliver them and achieve tangible savings and results, rather than just being at the front end. We've been in existence for 30 years, so we've got quite a broad experience. Our bread and butter is probably manufacturing organisations, but saying that, we've worked with a whole huge range of organisations and companies, from dealing with quite small SMEs, perhaps through the BEAT program that we've been heavily involved in delivering, through to sort of very sort of large scale area-based strategy projects like repowering the Black Country. So yeah, where to start? I think one of the key things is to iterate that measuring and sort of monitoring is very important. And it doesn't have to be sort of, a fancy piece of software. It could be literally just taking regular, gas and electricity meter readings or recording your fuel usage. Because so many companies that we go to, you're lucky if they've got sort of monthly meter readings. So for a resource you're actually paying for based on a quantity, it's kind of not good practice to not be measuring it. Sort of, you wouldn't not record how many sort of tons of steel you've got in the yard for your, your raw material quantities. So why would you do it for energy? So yeah, that kind of monitoring and measuring is a very important first step, because then you can actually, when you do put savings measures in place, you can actually see what it achieves. And also, you can compare it to some kind of useful metric. So like a business metric, perhaps turnover of the organisation, or, number of widgets shipped, something that sort of relates to the business activity rather than just, it is good to record absolute values as well, but pick a metric that's actually sort of useful to the business.
So when you say you work with businesses, how practically does it work? Is it the first thing, is it site visit? Is it,
yes.
Do you ask people, so, what are you trying to achieve here? What are your objectives? Or
It varies for each client, but, there's a first bit really is go in and understand what they're about and where they're using energy and where their sort of carbon emissions are lying. And then it's coming up with a plan of what they could do to, sort of to mitigate that and reduce that. And it all depends on the clients, what expertise they've got in-house. Some clients will just then go off and, do it themselves and implement stuff. Others, perhaps we provide monitoring facilities. We do have fancy software that can do that if you want to go down that path. Or it can be sort of, helping them through the process, project management, helping them to sort of find contractors, sort of specify what the contractors are going to do and, sort of manage that process. And like a lot of providers, if you do a good job, you end up sort of having quite a long-term relationship with some of those clients, because, you've tangibly saved them money and given them some, other business benefits. So they sort of stick with you, and, maybe you do the next bit and the next bit, because it might be you're starting off doing the sort of, sort of low cost or relatively low cost energy efficiency type stuff, and then you're sort of progressing on to things like putting a big PV array on top of your factory. Like people have mentioned many times, it is a journey, this, and that's perhaps another point to make. Try and make a bit of a longer term plan, maybe sort of 3 to 5 years, because there's things that you might want to do now from a sort of low carbon and sustainability point of view, but they're not quite viable yet at this moment in time. So you may be thinking, let's keep that in our sort of in our locker kind of thing, and look at it every year and see if the incentives have changed. So I'm particularly thinking about people going from like gas boilers to heat pumps. That's not really there as a sort of financial case at the moment, because of this differential between the cost of electricity and the cost per unit of energy of gas. But if that changes, then obviously that will become a lot more attractive, or it becomes mandatory, which that's probably going to be one of the drivers that comes down the line. So try and have a sort of a bit of a look forward as to what things may become viable in the future, or maybe a risk factor to the business in terms of sort of new legislation comes along and it's something you've got to respond to. Because if you're already sort of looking at it and thinking about it, you're sort of a couple of steps ahead of the game when it comes to actually having to do that. maybe I should let somebody else have a go. But
Let me come back to Lily actually from the ACO perspective, because I wonder whether it's important once you start out on this journey to focus on the things where you can have not quick wins or easy wins, but wins that are more visible to people, just so it encourages people that this really does work. Is that the way you look at it? Do you start with the things where you can show how effective it can be?
I think it's a difficult one really, because you do want to be seen, especially as a company like us. You know, we've made a statement. We don't want to say we're going to be net zero by 2030 and then just do all the background things, because you can be seen as greenwashing, which nobody wants. But you should also not be doing things to tell people you're doing things, because it's not a tick box exercise. It might be for some businesses, but for us it's because we should be doing it and it's the right thing to do. So it's good to have a mixture. You know, we don't talk about absolutely everything that we do, because you can only send out a newsletter so large that people will read. But also it's getting other businesses involved, such as the business growth roadshows that we did, because like Deb said, we want to make sure that we're supporting local, and it's to find the line between supporting local and supporting sustainable businesses, which is really difficult. So if we're not, you know, bringing other businesses on board with us, and we're just kind of trailblazing ahead and saying we're doing this, we're doing that, you're not, ha ha ha. That's not a very good image, and we don't want to be seen like that. You know, we want to be seen as supporting our community, supporting Shropshire, and getting involved. So whether that's, you know, bringing other businesses to our, like Ryan said, to our building and talking to them for an hour. You know, we're not going to put that on social media. But then we'll also when we put our solar panels on the roof, we did put that on social media. So it's difficult. I think it's just something you have to kind of do day by day. But for smaller businesses, I would say shout about what you're doing. If you're investing and you're doing these projects and you're going out and planting trees, doing some volunteering, tell people about it. Because you should be, and you should be recognised for this great work that you're doing, especially SMEs that, you know, are doing it because you think it's the right thing to do, not necessarily because you have the time or the money to do it, which is fantastic. And there are so many unsung heroes, I would say, in this field that go unnoticed.
But also because some of the spin-off benefits, as we said earlier, is that
Huge,
you may
yeah.
well become an approved and recognised supplier for a larger company because they didn't realise that was your policy in the first place. Neil, just coming over to you, is there a sort of shopping list of common pitfalls or things that people typically overlook, or is there a first place you always would go with the project thinking, I bet they haven't thought about this?
I think the short answer to that is no, and I think that SMEs sometimes are victims of the next best salesman that comes through the door. So whether it be the solar panel salesman, the heat pump salesman, whoever comes through the door and convinces you that that's a really good thing to do for your business, and you've got a bit of money and you want to do something. So there is that danger of not necessarily picking the right thing for the holistic benefit of your business or your property, but actually taking that next best salesman approach. So I think you do need to stand back. There is an awful lot of information out there. There's an awful lot of different ways in which you can go on your journey towards NZC and better management of your property. So I think you need to stand back. I would say talk to a consultant, but that would be me selling consultancy services. There are risks involved, as you mentioned there, picking the right size EV chargers, making sure your building is right. It's an easy thing to roll out LED panels across a building, but actually that does affect or potentially affect some of your switchgear within your building. So if you've got a large commercial property, there are risks around whatever you do as well as benefits. So you do need to think that whole process through. This isn't, behavioural change is the first thing. That's the first step, and then start to look for the small wins, the small gains. I really like what you've just said there about promoting what people do, because we also, recruitment's a challenge. Recruitment, retention of people. People actually do want to work in an environment where the company is doing things for the greater good, and that's really important. They don't want to work for a business where the profit's being taken out on fast cars and yachts and planes. They want to work for a company that's doing the greater good.
I'll perhaps ask this question of the three of you, starting with you, Neil. Are there some myths that need busting in this area? Are there things that people misunderstand, or are there barriers that don't actually exist that people think that are actually putting them off moving more quickly than perhaps they should do?
I think there's a lot of complicated regulation or myths around regulation, feed-in tariffs, return on investments. I think there's a lot of cloud around that people struggle to see their way through, work their way through. If you're going to put a heat pump in, is it more efficient than a gas boiler? Is the upfront cost? What's the payback period? It all starts to become a little bit complicated for people to work their way through that.
And how do people know which particular expert to ask about each one of these things?
Indeed.
Is another thing, isn't it?
Indeed. So that it's that, not so much myths, but it's the blur of information that's out there, and finding the right advice. So certainly companies like Cool Shropshire that are dealing specifically with SMEs, it's really important that they're there to give that advice.
Where are you, Deb, on this one in terms of potential misconceptions or myths that you need to bust?
I think the main one has been busted, really, is that sustainability is premium priced. There is still some of that out there, that buying recycled goods actually costs you more, buying green energy costs you more. So being a sustainable company has a premium on it. Increasingly that is being broken now, by demand for people, for recycled products, etc. That the price, it's simple economic supply and demand. But also now people are recognising that there's a synergy. It's not a binary debate. It's a synergy between reducing your energy consumption and saving costs. So I think that big myth around being a sustainable company will cost me money, I think that one is the one that we are continually trying to break, but actually we're being helped by outside on that one as well. So
Do a lot of businesses talk to you about, look, right, how quickly am I going to get a return on my investment then? Is that a big thing?
And reasonably so, yes. And that depends on what action they want to take. And my starting point, I was talking to a colleague earlier, there's very little point in being green and broke when it comes to a company. So it's a really reasonable question to ask, and really important one. And in the legislation, ESOS, they're talking about payback periods, etc. So there is a reasonableness in that. And I would always, in things that we're talking to companies about, actually have that in the back of my mind. What's the payback and what's important to the company? Yeah.
And Simon, do you think is one of the fallouts from the inflationary world that we live in at the moment, the fact that potentially you can get a return on investment more quickly than you maybe would have done a few years ago? Or is that too simplistic?
Well, I always advise clients to be quite cautious around that, because they might be paying a really high price for gas or electricity now, but hopefully it's maybe not going to last more than a year, because basically they're completely unsustainable, some of the prices that some businesses are paying. So I'm always sort of caution them, you might get that kind of quick bite on the payback the first year or so, but then maybe take a more sort of historically typical price level to sort of look at the payback over the longer term, because you don't want to, expect to get payback in sort of, 2 or 3 years, when actually in reality it's going to be, that's more like 5. So take a view on what the kind of medium-term energy price is going to be, rather than just saying, oh, that's the price we're paying today, so the payback is, that divided by the capital cost. That's a big one. I'm always sort of, because clearly people selling kit are going to say, oh, that's going to pay back in 2 years, and it perhaps will if there's, pound per kilowatt hour electricity is you're going to be paying that for 2 years, but chances are, a lot of businesses will fold if these high energy prices are sustained for much longer. I mean, it is a business killer. It's a very, very serious issue.
So last question from me then, before we open the floor up to questions, and I'll ask it of all of you. Is there one particular main barrier which you think needs to be broken down to just start some dialogue to reach? Is there something that's stopping you reaching some of these businesses at the moment?
Well, we're really, really busy working with these businesses, so we are reaching a lot of businesses.
Share your top tips in that case, is what I'm saying.
I mean, obviously the high energy prices really stimulated engagement with this issue, but it was already starting to happen before that, more from a sustainability point of view. People wanted to be more sustainable. So I would say that was sort of picking up in the last, maybe sort of 3 years. And then it's sort of been given rocket boosters by the energy prices in the last, sort of 12 to 18 months. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of the time it's people have got the day job to do. Because I personally have dealt with a lot of sort of small, medium-sized companies. The large companies, they've got people they can assign to it and to do it full time. But it's these smaller companies where, they're running the business. That's what's taking their time and getting whatever product and service it is they provide out the door. So they've got quite limited time to, devote to actually doing this. So I think anything where, so like programs like Beat, where you're providing an independent advisor, that can help them perhaps get over those first few steps. Because people often cite money as an issue, and obviously money can be an issue, but you tend to find that businesses, if there is a genuine opportunity there and they can see it and they understand it and they've got confidence in the benefits can deliver, then they get on with it, they do it, they find a way, they find a way to finance it, or they find the right, people resource to do it. But it's perhaps that earlier stage when it's more speculative. They haven't got time to speculatively, devote time to looking at a what if. It's once it becomes more of a, this is a genuine opportunity, let's, now move it forward.
And I mean, should you say, you mentioned the BEEP programme a couple of times. That's coming to an end very soon, isn't it? And what's replacing it? Is the same support available in a different form? Is it repackaged, is it? Or?
You'll have to ask our public sector colleagues about that. We're a humble deliverer of the service. But yeah, my understanding is, we know that the various LEPs and local authorities have bid in for funding. So there is going to be something coming along. But I can't really answer what it might be. Tim's laughing.
Pass over to Deb.
Because he probably knows.
So Deb, barriers to sort of start dialogue from your point of view?
I think a barrier is, heck, what do I do? And that's really where the Cool Shropshire comes in. But also, from the motivation point of view, is if it's business to business, then let people know that you're doing something. So having that action plan. If it's B2C, then use a logo or whatever to say that you're doing something. Because there's a huge demand, the number of people who will just look at a website and look for sustainability or something. They won't read the policy, but they want to know if you're doing something. So I think one of the barriers is trying to do things rather than just telling people. Mark what I said earlier about greenwashing and the CMA, but having some background there just to do something and to let it be known that you're doing something, I think.
Neil?
I'd go bigger picture. I think that the big barrier is the linking of electricity prices to the cost of gas. And if we can break that link and let electricity find its natural price as opposed to being underpinned by the price of gas and the production of electricity, we can bring the price of electricity down, which starts to make the return on investment for domestic heat pumps and everything else become much more manageable. So it's that big picture, that's change.
I think we all say yes to that one, don't we? And Lily, I guess from your point of view, I'd ask it slightly differently. Are there any particular barriers that you felt you had to overcome in the early stages when you first went on this journey?
There's a lot, definitely. I think, just being aware of what's going on. I mean, anytime I walk in a room, I'm normally the youngest person in the room, not to shade anybody.
Quite the opposite for me, to be honest.
And I think that can come with a lot of misconceptions and, first impressions and things like that on some people. So I think it's just being open to the next generation. I talk to kids about sustainability and they throw out words like biodiversity and greenhouse gases. And I'm like, oh my God, how do you know these words? I knew these words like a year ago. So I think it's, just don't not listen to people. And I think there is a tendency for certain people to do that. And it's just, breaking those barriers is really important, because some things I learned from 7-year-olds is absolutely fantastic. But then some things I learn from gentlemen such as yourself is also fantastic.
Old
so
people,
it's
yeah.
not old people, well-established people in their careers. So I think it's, be open, listen. We try and do a lot of listening, and then we try and do a lot of talking to people and giving advice as well. So I think you definitely have to come from both angles.
Excellent. Has anybody got any questions for our young panel members? I'll bring a microphone out to you if anybody has. Looks like Adrian has. Go on, steal a microphone, Adrian, go on.
Thank you. I was just going to ask the question, really. I think it'd be really interesting to understand. It's been mentioned several times this morning, but around the supply chain piece. And just be interested to know whether either you have experienced this yourself, or whether you've had clients where the driver to engage with this agenda is not just, I think Simon referenced this, it's a longer term piece rather than just the current energy challenge. How much of that is being driven by clients setting expectations, either very clearly in a procurement sense or more unspecified, as we want to see what your policy is on this because we want to engage with companies who have that kind of ethos?
Adrian, I could probably take that at the investment fund level, commercial properties, office blocks, warehouses, shopping centres, as well as managing energy. They're also securing the value of the asset. So the journey to net zero carbon is as much about securing the asset value as it is about that energy saving and that return on investment. So that's an important driver, but it's also an important driver that flows all the way through the chain, as it were. So tenants no longer want to come into an E-rated EPC building. They want to come into an A or a B-rated EPC building. And that's a driver, because then they get more pounds per square metre lettable value out of that property, securing the asset value. So at that top level, at that fund level, where they're spending hundreds of millions of pounds on going green, they're doing it for some very hard commercial reasons now, and that's a massive driver in our end of the marketplace. That's making those decisions where heat pump, take out your gas boiler, put a heat pump in, put solar panels on, may not stack up on a return on investment, but it's securing the property value, and it is also driving the rental values on these properties, so it's a huge driver.
Anybody else want to have a say on that one?
Yeah, it's a powerful driver, particularly sort of when your customer basically puts demands on you. We've seen it quite a lot in the food sector, where people are supplying supermarkets. So the big supermarkets are, pushing down requirements to not only, reduce carbon emissions, but also be very clearly better show, measure progress and substantiate it, not just the sort of the good old greenwash. So that's stimulated a lot of activity in that sector in particular. And you can only imagine similar things will start to happen more and more in other sectors, because it's one of those classic things. Suddenly your big client decides the supply chain's got to have ISO 50001, for instance, the energy management standard, and you're not there sort of thinking about, is this worth it? Your biggest client's asking to do it. You just get on with it, don't you? You don't go through all the sort of big questioning process. You want to carry on doing business with that client, so you sort of get on with it and find a way of doing it.
Do then, Deb, maybe just following up on that, a lot of companies at the moment look at it as a competitive advantage rather than something as a necessary
Hugely so.
exercise.
Hugely so. Being able to, if you've got two companies, same price, if you've got the choice of buying from one with sustainable credentials, which are evidence behind them, versus a company which isn't doing anything, it's not on their agenda, where will you buy from? You'll buy from the green one. And that's it coming down. Coming up, the Co-op do a sustainability research questionnaire or survey annually, and their figures show the percentage of people who actively boycott companies who are not sustainable is going up. So that's companies, that's customers that you won't even see if you're not doing it. So very much it's coming down on the business supply chain, but it's also coming up from customers on the front line. So it's really important, that supply chain bit.
Any more questions? Anybody else got any questions? One over here. Where's the microphone? Here we go. It's coming. I know we'd be able to hear you anyway, Mark, but the viewers need to hear you. So.
One for you, Neil, actually. You mentioned gas, and obviously gas is fossil fuel. You know, we've got to stop burning this fossil fuel just from a sustainability point of view. I know it's cheap, but we actually burn about 50% gas to make electricity, coming back into, you know, solar PV and all the other stuff. So as much as gas is cheap, it's short-term thinking that we should even be talking gas. So yes, it's 13 pence compared to 38 pence, but the electricity market, I don't see it going down. I think it will stabilise, but I think we're going to be around that 38 pence a kilowatt going forward. We're never going to see the 17, 21 pence, and I think this is like your co-op solar, and you know, where you can fix that for 20 years at 20 pence a kilowatt. I do see it, but I don't see those energy prices coming down, and the standing charge is horrendous. You know, I don't mind paying for electricity or gas, but it's that standing charges from you know, obviously the Ofgem regulators, it's a bit crucial. But do remember, around all this is job creation for the UK. So instead of oil tankers coming up to Milford Haven, this is actually creating absolutely fantastic sustainable jobs for the UK. As we go to this road to net zero, what an opportunity that we create our manufacturing back again. So I think it's a big key message as well, as we go on this journey, we actually are creating the next jobs for the next 50, 60 years. Sorry, Neil, I was coming back to your gas one.
I don't think that was a question.
No, I was just saying, you know, when you talk about gas, and we don't need gas. We've got to get rid of gas.
It's the disconnection of gas.
It is.
Removal of gas.
Yeah.
I mean, I think hydrogen might have something to play in this picture. We're going to need hydrogen, heavy transport, heavy manufacturing. He's going to need a gas-based fuel, and hydrogen's going to be part of that equation. But everything's going to make this picture up, isn't it? Except for fossil fuels.
It's funny, I'd just written down the word hydrogen when they were saying that question mark, just to say, because it's one thing we haven't really talked about today at all, and it just highlights just how quickly this whole environment is moving, doesn't it?
Yeah, we're going to see hydrogen in heavy transport. I mean, Mark alluded to buses running on electric. I think buses will predominantly run on hydrogen once, but there's a whole infrastructure that's got to be built and jobs to develop that market.
Any more questions, folks? Anybody else? One more on the front row here.
Hi. Sorry, hi, yeah. So I'm Tim Smith. I work for Shropshire Council. I work with Adrian, Matt and various others here. One of the things that I'm really excited about, and it touches on what Lily was saying, also touches on what Mark was saying, is around skills. I think that the workforce needs and the skills needs from what we're saying here today are really evident to us all. And I think that part of our role actually at the council is sort of linking up schools and the colleges and the universities where there are already excited, you know, young people who think we really want to not just understand what we can do for the future, but actually we want to see a role for ourselves and an opportunity. So I suppose it's a comment really to say that the skills element's really, really important for us to how can we take the story or a skills pathway or a curriculum and skills pathway, how can we show somebody at year 7 or 8 that there's an opportunity here in an area of interest, and there's a pathway through education and a place to learn, but also a business to land in that's really good. Now what that does is it sort of changes how careers events and how information gets into schools, and quite frankly schools need that help. So I was just thinking from a collective point of view and a panel point of view, we've talked a lot about people from a consultancy point of view, people who are providers, people who support businesses, but how can we do more with schools, local schools? What could ACO do as an example in your area to connect more and support those schools with those messages? So that's just a thought. I mean, how could we work collectively on that? What's your views?
Lily, you spend, as part of your community remit, you spend quite a lot of time in schools, talking to people at schools, don't you?
Yeah, so we do a lot with schools, a lot on careers in general, but now going into the role of sustainability more from an internal role, obviously, like myself and Ryan has. I'm doing a level 4 apprenticeship in corporate responsibility and sustainability, which I haven't mentioned, but I talk about that with students because it's the only entry level way now, and it's only existed for 12-ish months, to get into sustainability within And, you know, consultants are also doing this qualification in a bit of a different way. And I think there's about 114 of us in the country because it's still fairly new. You know, this didn't exist before. It didn't exist when I started my role. I found it and was like, I'll absolutely do that. So it is making sure students are aware about these things. You know, we've been talking about apprenticeships for so long. They still hold a stigma. So it's still, you know, working against that. But then also just making children passionate about these things. You know, they learn about it in school and it's not scaring them, not using fear-mongering tactics, but we invite them to our premises and we give them a tour. And just like we would if an adult came, and we get them to do environmental projects and, okay, redesign our product. How would you make it sustainable? What packaging are you going to use? And then they'll present it at the end of the day. And I'm talking Key Stage 2 and 3. And they love it. They love it. And I think it's just, if more businesses can do things like that, and then also go to their careers fairs and just talk about their role, because kids have no idea what they want to do when they're older. So why not tell them this is something to do? And it's really interesting. And we're always trying to get other businesses to support education in that way. The Marches Careers Hub, great people. I'm an enterprise advisor myself, so working with schools a lot, and they want these things. They're asking for them, but they don't know the businesses who will provide it. Because, like we said, time is such, you know, it's really difficult for businesses to do sustainability, let alone talk to kids about it, and then go to careers fairs and invite kids to their offices. So yeah, it's just step by step. But yeah, if anybody wants to ever get involved with careers and sustainability, let me know.
But it's part of the government's agenda, this as well, at the moment, isn't it? Through things like the local skills improvement plans and things like that, to try and create a closer link partnership between education and business. And Deb, this is part of it, isn't it?
Very much so. And we're some of it is people don't know what they don't know, so they don't know what questions to ask. So we're actually working with a college at the moment to develop well, it's 3 modules around anaerobic digestion and the use of that as an energy and a fertilizer and cost savings, etc. Because a lot of people, and that's for students, but also for the agricultural community. So that is, you know, older farmers, etc. To try and upskill, but upskill from an understanding perspective at the start, to then go on and actually learn the detail of it, about the generation of what sort of energy are we after, gas to grid, electricity, etc. So some of it is understanding what people don't know, to what questions are they asking in schools if they don't even know about what AD and even more acronyms, DESIR and HACCP and any more of those. So yeah.
I think, I mean, like most people, the biggest restriction to our growth as a business is recruitment. We can't get the people to deliver the work, and that restricts our growth. I'm a big advocate of apprenticeships. I came off of the tools. I started as a refrigeration engineer and worked my way through to consultancy. I think there's a bit of a myth in the consultancy world that you need a degree to be a consultant. I think the apprenticeship route should be strengthened. I think it's the quickest way to get people to be into the workplace and be useful in the workplace, is the apprenticeship route.
Simon, have the last word for us on this one then.
I think anything that kind of improves the engagement between education more broadly, not just schools, but also further education in universities, is a good thing, because, you know, I think historically people have been coming out of the various education points not necessarily with the skills that businesses actually want. You know, apart from reading, writing and doing sums, which the education sector taught me up to degree level, everything useful I learned other than that is basically I've learned in work, doing a job. So it'd be great if people could learn that stuff a bit sooner. You know, I'm particularly thinking about sort of problem solving around, you know, thinking around issues and working stuff out. You know, people being innovative, because people are really innovative if you kind of set them along that path. And I think the other thing about people having the right skills, I think if you give greater certainty about how many of these technologies we need to deliver over a certain sort of time frame, businesses can have more confidence to sort of invest the time and potentially money and engagement with various institutions that might provide the skilled people. They can do that knowing they've got confidence that, you know, say we're going to deliver X number of heat pumps per year, and that's definitely going to happen, and this is how it's going to happen. Then people are innovative and they find a way of doing it. But at the moment, we're in a situation where we know there's this massive job we've got to do over the next several decades, but it's not sort of planned out in a sort of timetable. So it's like we know we're going to need these skills, but we're not quite sure exactly when. And, you know, so you can't really invest the money and the effort to sort of train people up, getting all ready to deliver a certain type of technology. And then, you know, there's a gap of 2 years before it actually starts being delivered because the right pricing structures around energy aren't there, or the right incentives aren't there, or, you know, I think, you know, certainty and planning stuff out is a great empowerer, because then people will find a way to do it. People are innovative. They will come up with the goods. But if they don't think it's definitely going to happen, they're going to sit on their hands. So,
absolutely. Time for one more question, if anybody else has got one to finish us off. I think we've probably reached the natural conclusion, haven't we? Well, can we say a big thanks to our second panel then? To Deb, to Lily, to Simon and to Neil. I'm going to have a comfy chair instead. Thank you all, folks. Before I send you all off then on your way with just one more cold bacon or sausage butty to take to the office with you, we've covered a fair bit of ground this morning, it feels like to me, in the last 90 minutes. So the man who I'm sure is now going to summarise it all for us perfectly in the space of 3 or 4 minutes is Adrian Cooper from Shropshire Council. Over to you.
Thank you, Carl. I think we've been really lucky this morning to hear from an excellent panel, and thank you all for your time this morning to come along and share that with us. It's quite notable. I'm not sure whether this is necessarily apparent to you, but almost all of the people you've heard from this morning are local. They're either in Shropshire, the geographic county of Shropshire anyway, or very close to it. And we're very lucky, I think, in this part of the world to have access to this kind of expertise and advice that's available for our business colleagues to take advantage of. Some really key things that I think came out this morning, and I'm just going to do my best to try and pick up on those. This is not just a challenge that's about energy. There are other drivers here, and I think it's really interesting to note the key ones that are around supply chain, pressure from above, pressure from customers, pressure in terms of employees. Recruitment and retention is becoming an issue where taking the right steps or even just having a plan is going to help. And that leads us on quite neatly to some of the stages that I think were drawn out by our various panelists. Information is king. You need to be able to describe things that you're going to plan for. And to do that, really, you need to have some sort of measurement going on. There's help for you to do that. It's good to have a plan so you can focus and not get caught up in having so much going on. It's a very broad agenda. There's a lot to get to grips with. Much of it is technical or could be technical. It's good to focus on something. If you've got a plan, you've got some information, you can find a way forward. There is help and advice out there, including from various of the panelists that you've heard from this morning. And Shropshire Council is there to help in the background by hopefully improving some of the accessibility of some of this advice. So we're delighted to be able to do that. It's not in any sense hopeless. It changes all the time. But one of my favourite adages, and hopefully you'll share this, is never letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is an agenda where things change very quickly. The technology is changing, the level of information and good practice is changing. Don't wait. You need to take steps to get to grips with this, even if they're small steps initially. But it is worth doing. And I'm delighted that we've hopefully been able to help some of you along the way in doing that. Just to make the final point, which is that the footage from today's event will be available. So if you have colleagues or businesses that you come across who would find the sort of advice that we've heard this morning helpful, then you will be able to view footage of this event through Shropshire Council's YouTube channel, and we will put that out also on social media and through the Growth Hub. So you'll be able to access this or point people towards it if they'll find it's helpful. Then it will be there for you to use. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adrian. And just to add, once we've green screened in all the special effects and put the electric car chase in, it'll also be on Shropshire Business Live TV's March episode as well. So lots of places to look at it. Just on behalf of all the partners that have been involved in this morning, thanks for coming. As I say, there is genuinely still some food on the table. Don't go away empty-handed. And hopefully it's been food for thought. Thanks very much for coming. Thank you.